articles in the paper about the 2024, yeah, so a few years to go yet. Now, 8:45, it's been described by one MP as a living bereavement when grandparents lose access to their grandchildren after a family breakup.
Yeah, in the UK, there are no automatic rights for grandparents, so they have to fight for access through the courts. So there are now calls for that to change.
So let's discuss this with Marjorie, who is a grandparent and a campaigner, and the solicitor Melanie Hartley, who is also campaigning on this issue. And Marjorie, I'm going to speak to you first, that you haven't seen some of your grandchildren for a number of years, and how has that impacted you?
Well, I've got 6 grandchildren. 2 of them I don't see. So one thing is that we have lots of family occasions when the 2 children are absent. And the pain of that is quite significant, really. I mean, we have, the last time I noticed it was at Easter, when we always have an Easter egg hunt. And my mum was there last year, and the children haven't been there for quite some time. My mum has died, so the fact that we haven't had the grandchildren that we miss so very grievously, they're not there, they haven't seen their nan, they haven't got any idea of our side of the family. Well, that's actually terribly painful. I think you'll find grandparents in my situation go around permanently sad underneath, although we find ways of dealing with it and coping with it and moving forward. But there's a strong sense of grief, loss, anger, worry, because you worry about the impact on the children, because you know very well, if you've had a good relationship with them when they were little, that there are memories that they can't access and you can't access. There's experiences that they're forced to forget. And that's painful because you know in the long term it's going to damage them, it's going to damage how they make relationships with other people. Also, I know from my work with other grandparents that some people are very severely affected to the point of becoming very ill. Many of them have to go to the GP, a lot of them are on antidepressants. In our little group where we meet grandparents, there's terrible, terrible, distressing occasions when they simply pour out their grief to those of us who are there with them. And it's very, very severe, the impact on a grandparent's life.
Melanie, when you hear stories like that from Marjorie, how typical is it? How common is it? Because it's, as Marjorie's touched on, something that you may not want to talk about too often if you're in that position.
It's really typical, far too common, unfortunately. The impact of a grandparent-grandchild relationship is significant, and the family court does recognise that. There's just hurdles to overcome in terms of taking that step forward. There's the emotional hurdle that Marjorie's already explained, and the difficulties and the practicalities of perhaps moving that forward with your own children to pursue that course of contact with the child. Aside from the emotional, there's the legal battle as well. The legal side can be quite expensive, traumatic, it's stressful. On one hand, you know, you want contact with your grandchild, but you've got to take your child to the court to fight that, and it's very, very difficult emotionally to deal with.
Do you think that's something you'd be prepared to do, Marjorie? If the law in this country did change and grandparents got greater rights, would you go forward with something like that?
For a start, it's almost the last resort, in my opinion, because you want to come to some sort of understanding between the members of the family, keeping the child at the heart of it, because in the end it's not about anybody's rights, it's about the child's rights. The child's rights to a full family life, to the identity of a full set of experiences. So I would explore every option and try, you know, by whatever means I could, to try and make contact with any obstructing parent. Failing that, if there's anybody who can help to oil the wheels between us, I think we all both agree that you really do explore mediation and try and exhaust that. Unfortunately, despite that, you sometimes can't get through, and then, of course, court is the only option. I think particularly, and I have a friend of mine who was involved in a situation where there was a real risk of harm to the child and her daughter, you've got to go to court, there's no other way. But the court, unfortunately, it's such a battleground sometimes when you get to a situation like that, that it almost does more harm than good, doesn't it?
It can.
And I just wanted to ask about that potential automatic right. You know, should the law change to grant parents in Marjorie's position the automatic right to see their grandchildren?
So there's two elements to a grandparent's application, and one of them is applying for leave, which is permission essentially to proceed with the application. Now the practicalities of that are relatively simple in terms of you submit the application at the same time as an application to spend time with the child. But of course it's an obstacle, it's a hurdle that needs to be overcome, because the court has to assess whether or not there is that relationship between grandparent-grandchild and that connection to enable the application to move forward, and that sometimes can put grandparents off. If that was removed, then absolutely I think that grandparents would feel reassured that they didn't have that first hurdle to overcome, and practically it would make the application much easier for them.
Okay, just make a little point on that. I would like to see judges writing in the order whether or not it's been asked for an automatic right for the child to be able to sustain relationships with grandparents and the wider family, simply because it's the child's entitlement. If there's a problem, obviously, or there's major harm or damage going to be caused, you'd have to think twice about that. But I'd like that to be written into the judge's book. Many of them do, but an awful lot of them don't. And even if they do, it isn't always enforced. And I think that's probably both recognised, isn't it, the enforcement of an order.
Okay, Melanie and Marjorie, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. It's obviously a topic very close to your heart, and best of luck, Marjorie, with trying to reunite your grandchildren.